Welcome, Sandra, to Getting There with Amy Claire. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for inviting me as well. I'm
No problem.
excited.
So, just for the listeners, Sandra, can you just give them a brief kind of background about who you are?
Who I am. Okay, so I'm Sandra Canrom. I'm currently about to launch my own homeware brand, which I'm really excited about. And I'd say that I've lived in London most of my life, a big chunk of my life, but I was born in Uganda. And yeah, so my journey sort of has been ups and downs, wide angles, different types of adventures, different types of Sandras, and that's brought me all to who I am today.
Wow, I quite like that actually. The fact that rather than just go ups and downs, you said all like wide angles and stuff because it's not as just simple as ups and downs, is it?
Yeah, because I
Uh,
think some things can be good and you can change those different directions, but it doesn't mean necessarily bad. It just means that they're different experiences in life.
mm.
I think what life gives you are different types of experience. When you meet different people, they're all different ways of looking at life and looking at culture or having a different viewpoint for how you do things. And I used to always feel that, that everyone lived a very systematic way. And when you start really like opening your eyes and lifting your head out of the sand, you start to realize, hold on, wait a minute, there's different ways we can do this.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting thing for me about life. And I start to realize that a lot now. And that's pretty much what I try and live by every day. So I try to say like yes to every opportunity, speak to as many people as possible. And I kind of feel like by doing that more and more, these are all gifts and little doors you keep opening to who you are and what you can see and stuff that you can experience. So that's what I'm more excited about now. And I never thought that I'd be looking at things this way.
You said it's recent that you kind of started living this way. How recent?
So I'd say it was like almost like I had a moment where I had a bit of a flip.
Okay.
Flip of a switch, not flip of a mind, but a flip
Yeah.
of a switch, and flip of a mind as well. And this was about, I'd say, about 4 or 5 years ago,
Okay. Yeah.
and I was working in advertising, and this was like my corporate job, the one that you're like, right, when I get into a company, I'm gonna wear this every day, I'm gonna look like this, I'm gonna come to presentations.
Meghan Markle in suits.
Exactly. Like you literally thinking people are gonna take me seriously.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be like the bomb dilly bomb, whatever you wanna call it. But what I realized was that I was becoming something who I thought needed to become in order to be enjoying life, be taken seriously, all the things that I thought were important. And by doing that, I realized that was like not I wasn't experiencing life the way that I could be in terms of it being better. But also I lost who I was. I lost who I was because I was following almost like a blueprint of what society told me I
The
should be doing.
standards, that kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
you kind of it felt that. So when I felt like I lost who I was, I felt a little bit lost in a way, and I felt a little bit like, how am I going to figure out sort of why am I not feeling as happy as I should be? And then I decided that like a few things were missing. And I actually sat down with myself and decided a few things were missing, and I said, one, I want to be doing something that I'm going to be when I'm 70, 80 years old that I can look back and really be proud of. And I felt a little bit like I wasn't going to be proud of what I was doing then. I wasn't be proud of the impact I was making, the feelings I was having every day. I wasn't necessarily doing anything that was for me that I could look back and go, oh my gosh, this happened. So I kind of sat down closely and looked at myself and thought, hold on, I've come into this country, into the UK, of which I've lived in most of my life, but I've actually, there's another identity that I haven't really discovered, I haven't really explored, and that's my Ugandan identity. There's another continent I don't know that much about, and I felt ashamed in a way. I felt ashamed that I didn't know much about my my culture, and I knew about it from the sense of being brought up in a Ugandan household in the UK, but I didn't know about it in the sense of, oh my gosh, like what is it like over there, and what is our history like, what is the heritage, what is the richness, what is my culture added to society today. So I actually wanted to go and find out about it. So one of the things is like I need to go and understand my culture, because I do believe without understanding where you've really come from and your culture and your heritage, it's almost difficult to understand where you're going. So I wanted to do that, and the funny thing is that I never liked history in school. I didn't like history. I thought it was boring. I was always just like, why are we gonna look at things that's already happened? I want to do something that's ahead.
Okay.
But I was like, I want to know more about it. And at the same time, I wanted to be more creative. I was not being as creative as I wanted to be. I felt like, when you're going into a corporate world, sometimes it's hard to experiment. It's hard to think wide. It's hard to be curious, because everyone's very risk averse in that type of world. Everyone's very risk averse. So being creative means you can't be risk averse. You've got to almost, all those weird thoughts you have in your head, all those like fun, exciting emotions that you feel in your body when you see something or when something sparks your curiosity. If you don't dive into that, or if you're risk averse, you won't dive into that. And if you don't dive into that, you're not really stretching the limitations of who you can be or the things that life has kind of got to offer you. So I felt like, oh my gosh, like, wait, like I was leading that path of, to do this, I'm going to do that, but hold on, I want to do this, that's more fun.
Bit of a whirlwind of like, I could imagine like emotions as well, kind of going through that. And I agree with the corporate thing.
Yeah.
I've worked in corporate before, and it was actually such an education experience for me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. However, in terms of say what I wanted to do long term, again, I'm like you. I love all things creative. And
Yeah.
I like taking those kind of risks. And you're an entrepreneur now, and you have to take risks with that, don't you? And
Oh, totally.
it's one of those things as well. I agree that it wasn't for me. It's for some people, and great. But even for myself, I'm not sure about you. Like, I'm not a 9 to 5 girl. Like, I like every day to be a bit different. I know some people, they see that as being a nightmare because there's no structure to it. But I quite like that element to it.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for such a kind of in-depth
Yeah.
kind of overview there. That was really, really interesting as well to kind of see like how you almost view yourself as well. And we're going to go kind of dissect that a bit more now.
Yeah.
So we take it way back. So you mentioned
Way
back.
Way back.
So your kind of first time event that you've chosen was moving to the UK from Uganda. So do you remember much when you were in Uganda? Obviously it was a very young age. Do you remember much?
Do you know what? So I was in Uganda. I was born in Uganda, but I lived most of my time, like from the age of sort of 1 to 3, in Tanzania.
Oh,
So we moved to Tanzania. And I was fortunate enough to have nannies when I was over there. I didn't actually speak English at all.
What language did you speak?
Swahili.
Oh, cool.
So I spoke Swahili and had nannies, and it was beautiful. My mum worked for this construction company, and it was sort of great in a sense. But when we sort of came to the UK, we kind of came pretty much as refugees. And
How many of you were there?
just me and my mother
Okay.
came as refugees, and we kind of came pretty much from Tanzania to Uganda, sort of seeking asylum. And as in, like, politics wasn't sort of straight at that point, so we left pretty much in a hurry with everything that we had. And then we came to London. And it's so funny because when we first came to London, it was snowing. It was snowing. It was like, when was this? It was sort of like, it was in 1991 or something, and it was snowing like crazy. The snow was like up to like our knees.
What?
Like,
In London?
It was like one of the biggest snow, like I think on records ever.
And you were probably not expecting that, or was it more just the fact there was such a contrast?
I was not. It was a completely different to what I'm a 3-year-old, 4-year-old coming to this country, and I've gone from a hot climate that's on the equator to a country that's like snowing. And one of the things I said to my mum Swahili was, like, because all the white people in Tanzania had tans. So one of the things I said to the people over here, to my mother over here, was, oh, like, what's wrong with the white people here? And my mother was like, what do you mean?
I'm so white at Christmas myself, so.
I was like, because I was used to only seeing white, like London Beauty Works was a British company, but everyone was tan. So when I came here, I was just like so shocked. And it was so funny at that age that I was like thinking that something was wrong with people. And so that was obviously like first culture shock. And I didn't speak a word of English. So I need to learn English which I learned, I think, in about 2 months.
Was that challenging for you?
No, I learned it very quickly.
You were at that age where you were bringing
I literally learned English and picked it up straight away, like really, really quickly, really easily. And so that's sort of what I sort of came into. So it was a big culture shock coming into here. And I think the number one focus at that time for my mum, she said this, she said, number one focus for her was for me to be able to come here and adapt to this culture as quick as possible. So her aim was to make sure that I was able to get used to the country as quick as possible and sort of learn the language, learn the ways of doing everything. So that was a key thing for us, to just definitely just like go and throw yourself in it. And for me, being 3, 4, 5 years, everything's an adventure, so it's just sort of different, but it was like interesting.
Do you mentioned actually in your kind of intro, that one thing you were ashamed about was, say, not being in touch with your culture,
Yes.
back in Uganda and that. So when you first came here, you said that your mum really focused on kind of introducing you to like British culture. Do you think that was the start of you slowly kind of like, but maybe, but were you aware that you're kind of like pushing perhaps the other culture to the back because you're so focused in being surrounded by this culture, or what?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, for sure. But like the what tends to happen in any place, it's in that situation you're thinking I need to fit in. You're thinking I need to fit in. You're like when your fear factor kind of your survival instincts kind of fit in. You're just like, I just need to fit in. I need to survive. I need to find whatever it is. I need to make sure I can earn my money, get my food, have my warmth, have my security. That's what you're actually thinking. That's what my mum was programmed to think like that, and so and essentially I was. So it was speak the language, learn the way of dressing, learn the way they eat. Like breakfast in Uganda is not cereal. The cereal doesn't really, it's not a thing. People eat fruits. People eat like food for breakfast. People don't eat cereal, is not really considered. So everything, you're learning different cultural ways, and it's not, my mother's not all of a sudden going to keep doing the same thing. So she was doing all the things that we had to do in the UK. So essentially it was kind of watering down a little bit of my culture, because their sort of survival pack was acclimatized quick to this environment. So that was that essentially what was happening. And then that's pretty much how we lived, and that kept going on and on and on and on and on, I'd say, till like my later years, until I then realized, like sort of what I mentioned before, was I want to be able to come back to my identity, because you come to a point where you're like, hold on, like, who am I really actually? Wait a minute, like this, I'm trying to fit in, but by fitting in, I'm not really fitting in. But at the same time, you've kind of left whatever was your realness part. So you're in no man's land for a while, and being in no man's land is not fun, because it means that you're not really living. So my key thing then was going, right, I want to be able to know who I am, both culturally, but also both like personally, because even though I want to know my culture, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm identifying 100% with everything. That when I go to Uganda, they don't think I'm Ugandan, so I'm not accepted there. Do you know what I mean?
Why do you think that is?
But it's for sure because everything's different. I'm not the same. I'm not going to look at things the same way.
Yeah.
Like fashion the same way as someone in Uganda, or mentally how I think, my behavior. I've still been influenced by the Western world.
Yeah.
I've still interacted with so much people from different cultures that I would have never had the same experience of connecting with and interacting with in Uganda, that all influence the way that I think, the way that I behave, the decisions I make. So I'm never going to be the same way as I am in Uganda, for instance. But I also had to accept that. But then another thing I also had to accept was that I'm never going to be the same way as my mother, because her experience, different generations, exactly. So when you're kind of thinking, right, my identity is, I've got the things to sort of follow it, being a Ugandan, or it's being British, or it's being like my mother, and you don't fit into all of those, you're kind of going, wait a minute, so I don't fit into all of those, where do I fit? And the point where I then became comfortable was when I realized that you don't have to fit anywhere. Like, you don't need to follow another mold. I was like, I can make my own mold up. I can make Sandra mold. Yeah. And that mold doesn't mean that everyone else will fit into that mold. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to fit into that mold. Doesn't mean that I'm trying to fit into anyone else's mold. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, that's okay. I'm happy. That's good. I can have my own mold. It doesn't need to look like anything else. No one else has to fit into it. And that's okay, because sometimes what happens as people, we also go, we need a community. And I think we do need a community, but we think that our community are people that does everything, that fits into everything the same as we do. And I was like, no, that's not actually what I want. I want to make sure I'm still doing my own mold, but I realize that not everyone's going to fit into this. And that's great, because it just means that I can learn from my diverse mind community around me. So that was the sort of moment for me. That was like my big idea moment, epiphany moment, where I kind of realized, and I said, hold on, no one's going to fit into my mold, and I won't be fitting into anyone else's, so I'm making this myself. And that's when I started feeling a bit more like, okay, that's it. I'm feeling lighter. I'm like, okay, this is great. Now I'm beginning the journey now to go, let's go into who I am now, because I'm building up this mold. So now I'm looking at my mold and I'm going, let's see what this optimal mode is. And I'm still on this journey, but that's kind of when that moment happened. And that was the first time I was really going, I'm really, really excited about life. Like, if that was the time that I was going really excited about life. So I kind of feel like now it's like my yellow brick moment to kind of going, I'm just building my mold and I'm kind of figuring this figuring stuff out. And that's sort of where I sort of felt I am, and I think at that sort of right before that moment happened was I was sort of working in the corporate world, and I had I still felt lost in in the corporate world, and I was like, I'm never gonna be fully accepted. So that kind of helped me kind of go, wait, I'm not gonna be who I really am if I'm trying to sort of
We're actually going to go into a bit more detail with that, because that's going into your third event.
Oh yeah.
But if we just quickly go back to when you were, say, just moved from Uganda, can I ask, when you say first moved to London, did you meet many other refugees? What was that kind of experience? Did you kind of feel that you stood out? Did you feel like, actually no, I'm in a similar environment to others? Or how did that kind of like make you feel?
So when I first came here, it was pretty much the whole survival instinct was, we lived in an area where I was the only black girl in the primary school.
Oh wow, in the whole school?
In the whole school. And there was one mixed race girl.
Wow.
And then there was maybe like one Indian girl, and everyone else was white children. But my mum did that intentionally.
Oh, did she?
Okay. My family had moved into different parts of London, whereas we were the only ones sort of living in the outskirts, and she didn't want to move because she wanted me to get used to the culture very quickly. So almost it was like, oh, right, okay, so you're going to be living in a jungle for the rest of your life. So do you know what we're going to do? You're going to grow up in the bushes. So it was like, yeah, we're going to give you a level up to live. And that was kind of like what her thinking was, is just to kind of be like, okay,
this is your new friend, a bear.
Exactly.
The tiger.
Exactly. So get used to playing with little bears, and then when you go in the world, it's like, there you go. So that was kind of her way of like thinking to be able to kind of do it. And I don't actually think at that point her decisions for doing that was, just being survival instincts. I don't think they're the worst things, because I think by doing that, it's helped me understand different perspectives and seeing how different people think, and how to interact with different people, but more about interacting in the sense of understanding when giving information how it may be received.
Okay.
So, and I think it's made me more empathetic in that sense. So, but it was also my group of people that I've grown around with have been very diverse, and I think that's probably one of the things I'm very grateful for. I'm very grateful for her doing, was because it's not so that she only eliminated and still put me in the bushes. Like, she pulled me out in the bushes sometimes. It wasn't like she was just like, okay, I'm gonna be there the whole time, but she pulled me out and was like, I get used to this and get used to that and get used to that. And
what do you think, if you had to tell your mother like one thing looking back, that do you kind of see it from a different perspective now? As I say, as you've gotten older, it's like looking back, and say if you were in her position, how do you kind of like compare, say, what you were doing versus what
I don't think she did anything wrong. I personally don't think, I don't know what that's like a...
No, that's absolutely fine.
It nods up to her, nods up to me. Just kidding. No. But like, I don't mean it like, I don't think she did anything wrong to me. I mean, I don't think she did anything wrong.
Okay, you might need to say that last bit in English. I
know. No, I don't mean that she did anything wrong in terms of like, I'm talking about, oh my God, I'm perfect. But like, I mean in the sense of, I don't believe she could have done anything differently during that time.
Yeah.
And I think during that time, what she did, I even think even within this time, what it would have been done would have been the same thing. Because what she did was not celebrate the fact that I belong to anything. The whole idea was kind of going, get used to knowing that there's different things that exist outside of you.
Yeah.
And learn how to sort of interact with it. So I would tell her that you didn't do. I think everything that she did was right coming into another country.
Do you feel she was really kind of putting you first? Do you think, because as a mother, you know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think I think every parent will try and always do that and try and put them first. You want your child to be able to survive, and that's your key thing, is thinking, I want to make sure they can survive without me. So I think she was definitely putting me first, 100%. So that is super, super, like, that's definitely the thing that I've definitely learned. I think it's the thing I've got out of it now as well.
Okay, that's super interesting actually. It's nice to kind of get insight into that as well. I'm sure like other people, because it's like some people, you know, have said they have a very different experience. You know, some people might say no, we need to go to areas. Because obviously with London, isn't it? It's so
Yeah.
diverse. Like as in certain areas are known for certain ethnic groups,
Yeah.
things like that. So it's just interesting to hear from like your own experience as
Yeah.
well. And I think it's important to hear in your own words like how you
Yeah.
kind of found that. That now leads us in to your second event in time, which was like you stopped playing tennis. So I suppose before you stopped, you started playing.
Yeah.
And you got really into that, didn't you?
Yeah, so I played tennis for I played tennis for quite a bit. It was sort of in my, like, coming into my teen years. I started quite late, and tennis was literally my life. I was playing 6 days a week, like,
How long? Like training every day, my God.
every
Yeah.
day. And it wasn't like, I was kind of like getting up in the morning first thing before school, 2-3 hours, going to school, leaving school at like 3 o'clock, going to play as well in the afternoon. So I was doing easily sort of 4 days, 4 hours minimum on like a lowest day, but like an average of sort of 5 to 6 hours a day for 6 days a week.
Were you thinking that, right, this is the career I
Yeah.
want then? You were convinced.
In doing tennis, I wasn't playing to be like, oh, I'm gonna play club tennis. I was actually playing because I thought this was something I was gonna be a profession, as my profession, as my
Yeah.
career I was gonna be doing. So I had been doing that in intensity quite some time, and I sort of came up to the point of time I actually gave up was purely because of the around the idea of thinking, I didn't know if it's something that I can carry on doing in this country. I didn't think I could make it in this country, in the UK.
Okay.
Purely because I felt like I need to move abroad to be able to.
Where? Where would you think?
I just think it was a case of, it was less about necessarily where, it was more about the environment.
Okay.
I think like tennis in the UK is an elitist sport. So essentially you've got children that come from an elitist background at that time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're playing a sport, when you're doing it in with a mentality of kind of like, I could do the sport, but I might be able to do something else. It's like you're not sacrificing as much. So to do it, your training approach would be slightly different. Playing it in tennis in Russia, playing tennis in a tennis camp in Spain will be different. Everyone's going to be going with an intensity. People are going to be in different countries, and it's almost like very survival instincts as well. So the quality of training, the quality of coaching would be totally different. So I always felt like I was a point at like the quality of playing and the players and the coaching wasn't at a level that was best equipped to go a certain distance. And I wasn't also prepared to go abroad by myself.
Who got you kind of into tennis? Who was your influences? Do you feel that was it your choice completely, or did someone else kind of encourage you?
It was my choice. But the way it happened was kind of an accident. So the way that I played, the way that I started playing originally in the beginning was that I was actually doing athletics, and I was given like so many people were given like leaflets to go to this coaches coaching thing, which was an event where you had a coach that's coaching coaches how to coach other children, right? So they needed guinea pigs, the children.
Oh, okay.
So I went down, my mother took me down, and I could run for all the balls, and I was able to do everything apart from hit the ball. So I was able to, like, the movement, my agility was quite good. So the coach who was coaching the coaches saw me and was like, I want to coach Sandra.
Oh, wow. Okay,
So that's sort of how it started. And I was just like, this world was a bit like, oh, tennis, it's like much more complicated than just running in one direction. And it was much more interesting than running in just one direction. Oh, it's over. I felt a lot more interesting,
you were a young teen,
challenging. So I was, at this age, I was 11. Yeah, late 11. I'd say late 11 was indoors, so it was late 11, so 11 going on 12. And then I started playing, and then sort of my progression just sort of carried on, and sort of started playing, getting into it, and next thing you know, you're consumed in that world. Yeah.
Jeez, That's do you look back and do you regret leaving it, or are you happy with your decision?
I regret leaving it up to the point of about 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So I'd say I did regret playing, sort of not leaving tennis. Like, it was probably one of my biggest regrets I've ever had, and one of the ones I'd probably say that that's not only one, but I don't regret it anymore. I don't know why. I just had this. I've got this kind of like, I'm at peace with it. Like,
Yeah,
it's
that's a big weight off your shoulders, I can
oh
imagine.
my goodness, yeah, yeah, yeah. So sort of in the last 3 4 years, I had this kind of like, I'm okay about it. Like, I'm actually, I don't actually. I think what has come out of it is meant to. That was all meant to be. I think it's preparing me for something else. I think it's these are all key skills that I'm very. I see why I've gone through that process of playing tennis and having those type of skills and that type of world shown to me. So I don't regret it. I don't regret it anymore.
That's really nice. Do you believe that what will be? Everything happens for a reason, or are you one of those people that kind of believe, no, we can kind of change, we kind of create our own destiny?
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
So I think I'm not sort of person to sort of sit back and kind of go, oh, like whatever's gonna be will be, and things will just happen. The I'm very much lean in. I'm very much I and more so my attitude is now is lean in and look for what excites you in the heart. Like, I think if you do everything and you follow what excites you and you follow that feeling of, okay, I'm excited by this, and if you can match that with effort, then that's what you should be doing. However, when you keep pursuing that, keep pursuing that, you will always get signs along the way which will divert you or pivot you as you're going along. And I think it's those are the things which is where I then go, that's fine. That was what was meant to be. What was meant to be was meant to be. So, and then I kind of pivot a little bit. And I carry on. I do things with intent. But if I get like pivoted again, that's what's meant to happen. So that's how I look at everything. I think it's a mixture of both. I think you have to put intent into everything. I think you can make your destiny. You can shape it. But I think it's more about following the excitement of what your destiny you believe it can be. But you have to listen to all those signs when you're getting like, what's meant to be will be. If something's not meant to happen tomorrow, that's maybe not for you, or it's not, you're not ready for it yet.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so you've now say you've at this point you've stopped playing tennis. You mentioned you were building a life that existed beyond what you knew. So that was, I suppose, the point that we kind of got into earlier. You're kind of finding your feet a bit more now. You're trying something different. Then that kind of leads into your third event. So the day before you started to get to know yourself, the day before that, that's what I'm really intrigued by.
So, yeah, the day before I started actually getting to know myself was the moment that I realized that I don't need to be like anyone else. I don't need to be like my woman that's back in Uganda. I don't need to be like someone that's in the UK. I don't need to be like my mother. I don't need to be like my best friend. I need to be like what I need to be is my own unique individual mold. It's not going to look like anyone else's, and no one else is going to look like it. And that made me excited because it's almost like I'm not playing anyone else's playing with anyone else's Play-Doh, anyone else's sandpit. I'm playing my own one. I can do whatever I want. I can build a castle, I can do whatever it is, and it's my sandpit. Like, no one's going to look over and say that's wrong or that's right because it's mine. And when I kind of realised that, I was like, wait a minute. All this time I've been trying to do this, do this. I was like, the fun is here. Like, I'm creating my fun. This is it. This is me. So when I realised that, I was like, I felt like a sparkle in my eyes. I felt like a skip in my like. It felt like I was up to beat again. I felt like I was alive, and that's the moment where I was like, okay, now this is now where my life is actually really beginning because I get to sort of I'm writing my story, and I felt like I hadn't done that in the past. And it's so funny how you get so easily trapped into that. And then I kind of went the journey. Okay, what is this going to look like now? What is this going to look like? And that was for me. That was super super exciting for what I was looking forward to do.
You mentioned before you used the phrase that you felt like you were the only one dressed up in a costume at a costume party.
Yeah, so
Can you elaborate on that?
So I felt like the feeling of like sort of before actually figuring it yourself, feels almost like the best way I can describe it is before really figuring out like that I need to make my own mold, my own identity. The way I best describe it, sort of what you just mentioned, was it felt like I got invited to a costume party, but when I turned up, I was the only one in a costume.
Do you mean that the other people tricked and lied to you, or do you mean more that you stood out?
More that, first of all, I was in a costume, so I wasn't really being who I was.
Oh, I see, like that mask in terms
Like
of
mask
that
in terms of being
metaphorical,
who I was. But then secondly as well is that I took so much ownership and was led so much by what other people were doing that's what I followed. So when I got given the invite to it, I didn't ask, I didn't challenge it, I just turned up because I wasn't following my own guide. So by doing that, I was following the guide that I was given, then I turned up in a costume, so I wasn't really being who myself was, but I was also being led by other people. So then you feel like, okay, right, I'm there, I'm in a costume, I feel silly. But at the same time, you didn't even ask any questions, but you just went along with it. Why didn't I create something myself? Why didn't I not ask before coming in? Why didn't I not figure out what was going on? Like, I mean, I can't be the only person. If I'm the only person that's turning up, it must mean that I'm expecting something from other people. And that was another thing that I learned, was that I felt at that point everything was someone else's fault. And by that I mean as in, like, if I wasn't happy at work, that person should have made the effort to like be like, oh, are you okay? Be more. Or if someone on the if people aren't people on the train and they weren't being as happy, it was whatever, I felt like it was someone else's like responsibility, or they should be going, oh no, people should be doing this more. And I was like, hold on, no. I am in control of my destiny. I'm the one that's living in my path, my journey. If there is something that I don't like, if there is some form of change that needs to be made, I need to be an example of that first. So if I almost need to treat people and speak the way that I want everything to happen, regardless if it's just me. So I've just kind of taken the role of being more like that, and being more empathetic, and taking a step back and seeing things from other people's shoes. But essentially my thing is kind of now being a lot more forward stepping in everything that I do, and sort of owning taking responsibility for all the actions, not expecting anyone to do anything sort of for me, and kind of realizing that. So that's kind of changed the way that my emotions have sort of changed around.
Do you this is a question that definitely came to my mind when you were saying that you're kind of following everyone else's footsteps, or you're perhaps like kind of following the sheep, the herd, that kind of analogy. Would you consider yourself back then to be a people pleaser?
Yes, I'd probably say that I was. I think I'd probably say that I was, without knowing it. I don't think I was a people pleaser. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like, pick me. I don't think it was that. It wasn't the one that you're overtly going, oh my gosh, she's a people pleaser. No, it was more of the, I make my decisions based on, if
you want to make other people happy.
Yeah, like I'd take a survey. I'd do an internal survey of the people around me and go, what could this happen? What could we feel like this? What could that? And I go, okay, right, this is probably giving the biggest ratio to making sure that I'm either accepted or making sure that this is going to make me feel good. So I'll go with that decision. Like, it's almost like you take an internal questionnaire or a survey to all your responses. So it's not really based on you, it's based on what could happen. And you go, and the results are more based on who's going to be the happiest, what group will I fit in, and it's never based on, no, I want to do this, or I enjoy having really good conversations with that person, so I'm not going to go out to this big party instead of hanging around with these 3 people. It was like, oh, actually, I'm going to the party to be seen, or I know I'll be more accepted, rather than going to the 2 or 3 people that I actually enjoy having conversations with. So it's more like, it's that intrinsic kind of thought you probably didn't even realise, where you're going, what's going to make me look like I'm feeling better by society standards?
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. I think I have done, like, I mean, as you said, like, it's kind of more of a subconscious kind of pressure we put on ourselves to kind of like, because I really do like making people happy. I like making people laugh. I really get joy out of that. That's genuine joy.
Totally.
But it's one of those things that sometimes I look back and go, was that, say, action necessary, or did I really have to do that? Like, how? And I think the thing that I personally would kind of get annoyed with myself at is more when I do it for people that don't really care about me, or you're just putting on this kind of facade sometimes. You're like, but again, you don't realise you're not kind of doing it. It's just, yes, that's why I asked that, because that tends to come with when we follow other people's footsteps, when we get trapped in kind of society standards, we're pleasing other people. And even like you look at social media now, that almost kind of takes that and exaggerates it. Do you know what I mean? Like we're putting on this display for all our so-called followers or whichever, but it's almost a vicious circle. What's your kind of view on social media when it comes to that kind of thing? You know, you mentioned you were really trapped into society standards and what you felt like you should be. Do you get like influenced by things like social media and the internet now, or what, or maybe not so much?
If I said that I didn't, I'd be lying. Because even if I didn't think I was, ultimately in the back of my head, I would be without even realizing. I think it's going to happen to anyone who has it, regardless of everyone thinking that they sort of know their mental intake. I think, I mean, one thing social media has been great for so many different things. I think what it's been good for is that it's people have been able to connect. That's so much easier. People connecting with people that never would have been in like a million years. People getting to see different types of cultures. People getting to see how different people live. People getting to see interesting information. I think that's what was the best thing about it. I think we've been able to sort of merge our worlds a lot easier. I think what's starting to happen is that we've almost kind of got like bogged down at the same time in this whole, like, I feel like I'm not saying anything that's new. We're all sort of getting bogged down in this whole concept around living in this sort of bubble world of this virtual perfect life. Everyone's now trying to live the perfect life, but not live a perfect life for them, live a perfect life to be voted. It's almost like a voting show.
That's the key, I think, yeah.
It's like, and people are getting gratitude for being voted, having the most perfect life. And it's not actually about them. I think a lot of people are sort of like, the meaning of life is lost a little bit. Like the whole meaning of life is lost a little bit from that, and because of social media. So that's my thing. It's like I do like it for connecting to people. So I have a love-hate relationship with it. I've never been someone that's been big on sharing on social media, purely because I didn't want to be judged. Purely because I didn't want to be. You didn't want no one sort of, you know, taking notes down on how you're living your life and going, oh, she's not looking, you know, she's doing this or she's doing that. So in the end, it's almost like just don't share anything. So I think it's good for certain things. I think there needs to be a social media platform that's purely based on the meaning of life and the meaning of the people that you're closest with. That's missing right now. And that's sort of where I think that's good for, sort of in that sort of sense. So that's where I stand. I think using it in the right way, it is. But I think now it's kind of got a little bit toxic.
The reason I asked you that question about social media is because I want to see your view on, if you took it where we are now in terms of the online activity, and we go back to, say, when you were playing tennis, for example, and if social media like it is now was a similar kind of influence back then, how do you think that would have affected you in your decisions to, say, continue or leave tennis? Or do you think it would have no influence at all? I know that's a very in-depth question. I was just generally curious.
Yeah, I think possibly, I don't know. It depends. I think it depends on what type of message it was, because I think at that time.
Was social media big time back then? Was it?
No. Social media was not big at all. Like it was like M&S. It was M&S. Sorry, MSN. It was MSN. It was like Hotmail. That was like the thing.
MSN. Do you remember Bebo?
No, I didn't use Bebo.
I never used that either.
That was after me.
I never actually used it. I just
MSN. Like after school, it was like Hotmail. I was like,
was it?
Yeah. That was definitely the thing. No, I don't think social media affected it too much. I think not too much, maybe. I don't know what all these like international tennis camps look like. I might have seen the way it looks like, and I might have been really excited by it. I might connect with someone who was speaking by it, and might not have been as scared. Might have been as worried about it. I might have been like, let me do this, but I don't know. But that's so. I think that's a question. I don't really know what would have. I don't know what would happen, but quite possibly in maybe a good way as well. I don't know.
I think it's one of those questions I don't actually need a concrete answer for. It's more just a question to ponder in terms of whether it be for you with tennis or other people. It could be back when they were younger. Like, because I think obviously people go, oh, social media and these kids these days and stuff like that. But I actually want people to think that, okay, if you go back to a time, it's very important in your life that your life essentially revolved around, and you put today's social media kind of around that. Like, how would it change? Do you know what I mean? It's a big thing. Like, if you go back to the 80s, for example, go back to the 70s, whichever, it's like everyone has times in their life. And I just think that, you know, where they start questioning things, or they're thinking, this is my my pathway. And it's just really interesting to see that, like, how times have changed with that. And that's why I wanted to ask, because it's you see people now, they have to share everything. They need to be, people need to see what I'm doing and look at my achievements. So something like tennis, such a big deal. It involves winning, it involves losing, it involves, you know, there's a lot of competitiveness in it. So that's why I specifically kind of asked about that, because I think it could be interesting to see, like, how it would have been that.
I'm not an oversharer, so I'd probably say I'm not an oversharer. And
so you're perhaps fine, but for other people,
from social media, I'm not a big oversharer. But I actually think I want to overshare more.
You do,
purely because I think it would be good for me, but also I think it would be good for others. Because for me, the reason why I don't over. It's not that I don't overshare. It's not like I'm not going, I don't overshare on social media. It's more of a case of there's so many facets to any individual, and for me, I think there's so many facets and dimensions to me as a person that it's almost, you start thinking too much of what part do I share. So then you start going, oh, this is too silly. Oh my gosh, I'm not in the mood right now, or elements of stuff like that, and you almost start thinking about what the portrait of who you are is going to be based on a few things. But the reason why I'm thinking I want to overshare more is because I'm becoming more comfortable with who I am.
Okay.
And I'm into my mold. I'm okay with that.
There's
security there. Yeah. So it's totally, it's like I'm more comfortable with who I am. So that's why I'm ready to show that. But at the same time, for me, I said if I'm going to show good parts, I want to show bad parts as well. So that's the reason why I'm actually going. I want to overshare more, because I want to share, like, I want to
the truth.
I want to share the truth. You want people to be able to see, like, that everyone's going through the same emotions, and I understand that now. I feel like everyone is fighting the same battles as we're all fighting mentally.
It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. I've seen it in
every single, and that's actually the mind frame that I have when I go and speak to anyone and everyone. I genuinely don't sit there going, this person is absolutely. I will sit there and normally be like, how can I help them with some form of element or one problem that they have?
Okay.
And because I don't go in the mind frame. I used to have that mind frame of, oh my gosh, so they're fine. Because now when you go with that attitude, even the person that's in a bad mood, you won't respond to them in a very negative way. You respond to them in like, oh my gosh, like, oh, hold on, like, don't worry about that guy that held his hand on the lift, you know, would have been, you don't know what's happened, etc. I said that the other day as well when I was going to work. I said to someone, he was getting annoyed with someone else that held the lift. I was like, he might have been like on his last day warning, his wife's got pregnant, he's losing his job, something else happened. Yeah. And I imagine he's just done that for like 2 seconds or so, whatever it was. And he was like, actually, you know, I got the point. So now I kind of go, okay, how can I help with them? That's my now mentality. I try and think in that sort of sense, because now I do realize that everyone is going through something.
It's all perspective, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah, that's what I've learned. I it's only in recent years I think I've kind of I think it's one thing to know something, but it's another to actually understand it and kind of implement it in your life.
Yeah.
So I hear a classic example like, oh yeah, I'm so aware that, say for example, social media is bad, or I'm so aware that everyone goes through ups and downs. Yeah, they know that, but actually they don't fully understand it, because if you're fully understanding it, then you kind of try to make positive changes in your own life. And I think a lot of people struggle. I've seen that anyway from my own perspective, that that's something I had to learn myself. You know, it's okay, you are aware that, say, this could be a bad influence, but you're still not doing anything about it. So therefore you know it, but you're not quite understanding it. So that's kind of a more recent thing that I've tried to do. Can I just ask, what is, if you could kind of pick someone that's influenced your life, who would that be?
One person?
If you can, but it doesn't have to be. But like, if you can, who do you think is kind of, in terms of got you to where you are now, who do you think that would be?
Who's got me? I think there's a collection of different people, different phases of my life. Okay, so I will start from today.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going backwards. So I'd sort of say right now, I definitely don't have one person. Creatively, I've got someone all the way from Virgil Abloh. And it's not necessarily creatively in the sense of what he's creatively making. It's more his attitude. It's more his attitude and his approach to what he's doing. Yeah. So that's inspired me. because at one point everyone used to say you've got to focus on one thing, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. So I think what he's doing is he's fully exercising all the things that he's got passion for and he loves. And I think for me that's really good to see someone doing that, because there's different methods that everyone had. And I think I like his method because it speaks to me. I think if you're someone that is very head down and looks at one thing, it works for them. Whereas I think some people work in different ways. And there was a point where everyone always said you have to do things like this in order to be successful. You need to just do one thing and focus on it like that. Whereas you start to realize now there's different things. So he's inspired me in that sense. I'd say in terms of Oprah, more in the sense of using the mentality of having hardship, and not sort of dwelling on that, and taking that and using that as energy and using that to build up and fill her own spirituality, emotional intelligence to turn it into good. So for me, it's when I have someone like that, I always think of, you know what, any negativity that you bring into your life, you can turn it around. You can try and understand it, and it's seeing her face a lot of her demons and emotions and traumas. It's been nice. It's good to see when people are doing that, because I think it makes you realize that everyone's going through the same phase, but also good can come out of it. So I say her for sure. I think what's really nice is seeing athletes have been like very inspirational to me. I think athletes are absolutely like super amazing people, just because a lot of them are constantly breaking boundaries. When you've got anything from like Muhammad Ali, you've got record breakers, like people that's kind of inspired me. In the business world, Steve Jobs, I think he's not necessarily for, everyone has facets to them, but not necessarily for the management styles as like he's sort of known for, but more in the fact that he's, in his mind, he was so obsessed with what he was doing. He was so obsessed by his ambition and his goal. The determination to sort of stick by what he was doing was really, it's super fascinating. His intricacies, like at one point I used to feel like I was being always told I was a perfectionist, and that made me feel a certain type of way. It makes you feel a little bit like, hold on, am I like, is this wrong? But like seeing someone like that and actually being obsessed by particular details, by his vision, that's really inspiring to know that, taking that care. So that's really inspiring for me.
You've listed a fair few there, so
I
thought you were going to get stuck with that one, but nope, you definitely didn't.
I can roll them out. But yeah, I think there's different things and different people. Like my friends inspire me.
Yeah.
My friends inspire me. My friends remind me a lot of, like, to be honest with you, my friends are probably bigger inspiration than a lot of even these people, because I think when I sit with some of my friends, they tell me things about me that I didn't realize. So
positive and negative?
Positive and negative.
Yeah.
But it makes me, I grow from their negativity. 100%. But I also, sometimes they'll tell me things and I'm like, oh, they can see that. And I'm like, okay, like, get back at it. Okay, cool. So they remind me of my ammunition sometimes. Like when I'm around my friends, like I think that's one good thing about everyone. Have friends around you that remind you about the ammunition you've got in your pocket. Because what you then because a lot of times we forget. So when you have a friend that sort of gets up in the morning and says, you know what, you're really good at X, Y, Z, and you shouldn't expect anything less. It makes you get the next day and go, actually, I am good at this. So when you're able to have all these people that remind you of ammunition, and also remind you of things that are weighing it down, it makes it easier. Like that's actually a key thing in terms of even identifying who you are as a person, because when you've got the people that are honest around you and the people that are able to show you and bring your true self out, and they able to also remind you about that, that's amazing. That's priceless. That's like 100% priceless for me.
Using your experience, Sandra, that you've kind of shared and your insights, what would you say to the listeners? What would you kind of... Is there anything you'd kind of like to say to them?
People that are around you, I think. So sort of building on that last sort of point, building around you. Really try and be around people who bring the best out of you. And sometimes the way that I measure that is by, not measure it, but you know when you meet someone or you see someone and then you just leave, that it's a feeling afterwards that you get, and you just leave, you just either close the door or you just left them and you just left, and you're like, that feeling, that split second feeling, that second feeling of, I feel good, and you feel like your shoulders are up, and the next step you're taking, I feel like I'm back against the world again. Yeah. If you feel like that when you've met one of your friends or any particular person that you've met, whether it's on the street, you make sure you hold on to that person. That's definitely the one thing. Because I think we're a community of people, but also when you're able to reflect who you really are and it's celebrated, that's amazing. Like that's the key thing. Working environment, anything. That's number one thing I'd say for sure. So that's one of the things I sort of pass on to the listeners.
That's actually really, really insightful. I quite like that, yeah, because I think that is important, and I think everyone's at different stages of their lives, right?
Yeah.
And some people learn that sooner and others learn it later.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And also just thank you for being on the show. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I do apologise if you did hear a cat meow in the background. My lovely, adorable, but today annoying cat was scratching against the door, so and meowing. So I do apologise if you hear that in the background. But yes, thank you all for listening. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.